Hello, everybody. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents. I've got Lis Goodwin here in the UK, who's going to share some thoughts with us about a subject that is very seldom touched these days. How are you, Lis?
I'm very good, thank you.
Great. Tell us a little bit about you and what your subject is today.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about organ donation, blood, and the Torah. I want to talk about this subject, and I want to make sure that I give some scriptural connections to it. It's going to be a very upsetting subject, I'm afraid, but that is the nature of these things when as it were, the information is not put out. The press don't tell the truth about this subject, so it's very, very important to share it.
It's need to know,
Yeah,
for
very
sure.
much so. Yeah, yeah. Would it be okay with you if I just pray before we go any further?
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
really want to ask the Lord to come in and help me deliver this information. So, yeah. Heavenly Father, I just ask you, please, to be present with us as we put this information together and share it. Lord, I just pray that you would ensure that what I say is edifying and helpful.
Yes.
And Lord, I pray that those who need to hear this information will receive this information. And Lord, I just pray that that you'll be with us through this process. And this I ask, Lord, in Yeshua's holy name. Amen.
In a way, your subject is very frightening.
It is.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially as I looked a little. I kind of boned up for this, and what I saw was, well, I don't want to steal your thunder.
Hmm. Well, I'm going to
Okay.
start by just sharing a trigger warning, a bit of a caveat here. If you are listening and if you or a family member has been an organ recipient, or if a loved one or family member was an organ donor at their death, I urge you to just exercise caution as to when you listen to this broadcast. Please choose a suitable time to listen to this information when you will be able to absorb it and deal with the upsetting nature of it. This information is going to upset everybody who hears it. If you don't already know this, this is going to be upsetting for you. So I just warn you. My reason for sharing this is because it's vital information and it's not commonly known, but it can be easily verified. And I'm going to be using sources which I'm going to be getting other people to speak, really, because you don't have to take this from me. This is not my information. This is information that comes from good sources. I'm going to start by reading Proverbs Chapter 6, verses 16 to 19. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. I think that is going to be highly appropriate for the information that I'm sharing today. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to share Exodus 20:13, thou shalt not kill. The shocking fact is that no one has ever given informed consent to be an organ donor after their death. There is no such thing as a donated organ. Because to give something, you must understand and know what that gift entails. Informed consent has never been obtained from any such donor. There are certain organs, the heart, the lungs, the liver, which have to be perfused with blood from a living donor. Therefore, they have to be removed from a living donor. There are organs which can be removed very shortly after death, the kidneys within about 30 minutes of actual death, as we understand it. So then we're going to get into the technicalities here of how death has been redefined in order to obtain organs for transplantation. Donors who have provided heart, lungs, or liver died because their organs were removed. They may have died had life support been removed, but then they would have actually been dead, not died from the procedure to harvest their organs. As I say, within 30 minutes of death,
God.
kidneys can still be viably taken for transplant. Sorry, what did you want to say something?
Oh, I just said that is probably when we think of organ donation, that's the
Mm.
big fear right
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
You are
absolutely.
not dead when they take that.
No, no, you can't be, as we'll talk about that. So kidneys can still be viably taken for transplant within about 30 minutes of death, and some other tissues, such as heart valves, corneas, or bone for bone grafts, can be taken post-mortem, that is, after death, as the public understands the term. So we're going to look at some information here, and I want to do a screen share.
Okay.
Let's bring that page up and share my screen. This is the one I want to share. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. So this is from the blog post that I sent you, Jackson. So if you would be kind enough to share that link when you put the video out, there's that link and the link to organfacts.net. Both of those are fantastic links for people to verify what I'm saying. The reason I'm using my own blog post here is because when you go to that, all the links are included. So they can go straight from this information to the original article without me having to give you lots and lots of links.
I shall.
Okay, that's great. So let me just move me out of the way. Let me move me over here. That's better. Okay. So I'm just going to literally read this. This is the article which I read, goodness knows how many years ago now, where I discovered the horrible truth about organ donation. And this article was put out by Discovery magazine. It's a reputable magazine. Generally, they produce scientific information. And I'm just going to read what I've got quoted here. Organ transplants would be peripheral to the story of death if they were what the organ trade claimed them to be, the neat extraction of body parts from totally dead, unfeeling corpses. But it's more complicated and messier than that. The grisly facts compiled in this article are not an attempt to derail organ transplantation, an impossible task given how entrenched the industry is, but knowledge that has been gained from the medical establishment's obsession with recycling the bodies of people who are, in the words of Dr. Michael DeVita of the University of Pittsburgh's Medical Center, only pretty dead. Now, here we get into the real issue here, because anesthesiologists have been at the forefront of questioning the finality of this thing called brain death. Brain death is a definition of death that you or I would not recognize as death. To be brain dead, you have to have flat brain waves. You will still have a beating heart. You will still be respiring. That means that if you're on a ventilator, which most people in that situation would be on a ventilator, that person will still be able to perform the gaseous exchange of respiration in their lungs. In other words, the oxygen going in will go into their bloodstream, their circulatory system is functioning, their immune system functions, all of the general things that go on in a human body function. If this person was dead and you put them on a ventilator, their blood would not absorb that oxygen.
That sounds like coma or
very much.
unconsciousness.
And where is that line, Jackson? That's the problem, isn't it? Where do you draw that line if the person who is testing you is, thinking, well, maybe organs, maybe we can get some organs here.
Well, studying this in seminary, this certainly came up. It was part of the course that we were taking in ethics, and this isn't something that is agreed on by everybody.
No. It's a very it's a subject most people don't want to think about. And in the UK at the moment, the law has just been passed. It was the 20th of May. The law came into effect that we are all now organ donors unless we opt out. So they've changed it from an opt-in system to an opt-out system, knowing full well that most people just won't bother to opt out because they're not thinking about it. And so this is a way, in theory, of getting more organs. But as we'll see, that's not actually necessarily going to be the effect of this.
Thank you.
So I'll just carry on with this quote here. So anesthesiologists have been at the forefront of questioning the finality of brain death and whether what they call, and this is a horrible phrase, beating heart cadavers truly are unfeeling, unaware corpses. They've also begun wondering about what a pretty dead donor may experience during a 3 to 5 hour harvest. And I'll just translate that in case anyone doesn't know the Latin, without anesthetic. And they're speaking out on the subject. So there are some disturbing cases. I'm only going to share one because there are others in the article, and really it's all a bit much. This patient, 30-year-old patient with severe head trauma, and very often this is what will happen. So this might be somebody who's been in a motorcycle accident or a car accident. Those are kind of optimal because the brain is damaged, but everything else seems to be okay, or just a bit, So preparations were made to excise this patient's organs. The on-call anesthesiologist noticed that the beating heart cadaver was breathing spontaneously, but the declaring physician said that because he was not going to recover, he could be declared dead. The harvest proceeded over the objections of the anesthesiologist, who saw the donor move and react to the scalpel with hypertension that had to be treated. It was in vain, since the proposed liver recipient died before he could get the organ, which went untransplanted.
Oh my.
There are other cases in that article, which I'm not going to quote, but there are worse than that. I deliberately just picked that one because it's just such a distressing thing to think about. So in cases like this, what the anesthesiologists are saying is that patients are reacting, these as it were, these organ donors, they are supposedly brain dead.
Yeah.
So they give them, they only give them an agent to basically, when you have surgery, you have a paralyzing agent and an anesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give them the anesthetic. They just give them the paralyzing agent.
Oh.
So what they're saying is they've noticed that when we're talking here about hypertension, that is the response of a patient. This is very similar to patients who have claimed after surgery that they felt everything. We've heard cases like that where patients have gone through surgery and they come out at the end and they say, I felt everything, I wasn't sufficiently anesthetized. So this is just absolutely diabolical. It's diabolical. And that's why this information is so vital to share. Nobody who hears this broadcast should do anything other than make sure that they are not on the organ donor register.
You're talking about murder for money.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Okay, so let's move on to how they came to this. Now, 13 men in 1968, and I'm going to quote here from Proverbs again. These are feet that are swift in running to evil, hands that shed innocent blood. That's exactly what these people are. 13 men gathered at the Harvard Medical School to virtually undo 5,000 years of the study of death. In a 3-month period, the Harvard Committee, the full name, the Ad Hoc Committee of the Harvard Medical School, to examine the definition of brain death, hammered out a simple set of criteria that today allows doctors to declare a person dead in less time than it takes to get a decent eye exam. A good deal of medical language was used, but in the end, the committee's criteria switched the debate from biology to philosophy. Before many years went by, it became accepted by most of the medical establishment that death wasn't defined by a heart that could not be restarted or lungs that could not breathe. No, you were considered dead when you suffered a loss of personhood. So they based this criteria on 0 patients. No experiments were conducted, either with humans or animals, but they soon became the standard for declaring people dead in several states. And in 1981, the Uniform Determination of Death Act, the UDDA, was sanctioned by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. The UDDA is based on the Harvard's Ad Hoc Committee's report that a 4-page article defining death could be codified by all 50 states within 13 years is staggering. Brain dead people, their wounds heal. Infections are fought by the body. Infections produce fever. All the general things that a human can do, as I said before, cellular respiration takes place, the exchange of oxygen within cells. These are not dead people by any understanding that you or I would have. And so there's no possibility of informed consent.
Well, this idea of personhood, if you don't mind me interrupting,
Go on.
does an animal have a sense of personhood in the first place? And if an animal does not, then we might just call what they're doing ritual slaughter.
Yes.
Seems to me.
Yes.
And
I can't see it
who
any other
can
way.
judge the sense of personhood
Yeah.
in one person or the other?
Mm.
You see that you're right when you're saying this is down to a matter of philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible.
It comes down to the ability to perform the task and therefore needing to make organs available in order to do that. And we start, of course, with Christian Barnard in South Africa.
Yes.
And, you know, that didn't start out well. And, you know, the ability to do this has increased, obviously. But there, as I say, there's never ever been informed consent from any donor, because nobody would ever agree to this.
No.
Nobody. It's an absolute deception. It's pure deception. And the public don't know. And I remember sitting down with a dear friend of mine, and I asked her if she was on the organ donor register, and she said, well, you know, I'm not, but I feel like I ought to be. But then when I've prayed about it, I really, really thought that the Lord didn't want me to. And I just said to her, would you like an anesthetic when your organs are removed? And she looked at me and said, but I'll be dead. And I said, no, you won't. And she's like, what? You won't be dead. You can't take the most, you know, the organs that are the, you know, the most commonly needed. I mean, you can be a living donor for a kidney, although even that is not recommended. It's not good for you, and it may not work out for the person receiving it either. It's not without its risks. But
you're talking about somebody that is unconscious because they are medically induced into unconsciousness, yet they have no anesthetic in order to reduce or eliminate pain.
Yeah. And the thing is that we don't know what they feel.
We don't know.
But what we can say, what I am going to share, is some information about brain death, cardiac death. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to just play a short video, which I put together.
Sure.
This is a great little video. I just tried to take sort of the quintessence of the information, just to make a 5-minute video to show the information. And this is coming from a doctor who knows exactly what he's talking about. This is Dr. Paul Byrne. And I'm just going to move me again out of the way and let this play.
It could be that when you share, you need to click the little box that says share computer volume.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, turn off share and turn it back on and see if you can find that.
Let me just pause that and see. Stop share.
Yeah, you've got to go clear out of sharing.
Let me, if I just, there's no sound until he starts speaking. So if that doesn't come through, let me know. I just wanted to provide this information for people just to read this. So he's talking, he's going to start by talking about a baby that was declared brain dead, who went on to go to school, get straight A's, get married, and have 3 children of his own. So this is just shows you that there's no way we should be declaring people brain dead. Okay, let's have a listen.
I'm not getting any sound here. So
Okay, thank you. How do I do that? So
okay, get off of screen share and
yeah,
I'll erase this part.
okay.
All right. Now, when you click on screen share, you'll see a little box down at the bottom
Yep. Let
of
me
the
just move
screen.
that back.
It says share computer audio.
Okay, hold on.
See that?
Find it.
Yeah, it's down at
Hover in
the
the right place. Here we go. Yes, here we go. Share computer
okay.
sound. Thank you. All right, that's the right one. Let me click on the right one. Here we go. All right, so I'll start that from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a video of Dr. Paul Byrne talking about brain death. This is DBD and DCD. So this is death by brain death, death by cardiac death criteria, and the apnea test. And it's just 5 minutes. I wanted to just really put together the quintessence of the information, some really useful clips here. I hope this will be helpful. So let's have a listen. The audio will start just in a minute.
How did I start to study this subject? This baby, Joseph, was the one who started my study. Joseph had flat brain waves while he was still on the ventilator about 5 weeks after his delivery. We didn't take his organs. We didn't turn off his ventilator, even though his brain waves were interpreted as consistent with cerebral death. That's what was written on his chart. It did not make sense to me. So we continued to treat him. This is Joseph when he's about 7. And when Joseph went to school, he got straight A's, excellent grades. He ran track, he played baseball. This is Joseph as an adult and married, and they since have another child, so they have 3 children. Between 68 and 78, there were more than 30 different sets of criteria. Each set tends to become less strict than the previous set. The Harvard criteria in brain death is abbreviated in the literature these days as DBD, donation by brain death. The criteria became changed in several ways, but one you can readily understand. The Harvard criteria required 24 hours of observation. They shortened that time from 12 hours to 6 hours to 3 hours to 1 hour. And there's one set of criteria in the literature that they take them off the ventilator for 30 to 60 seconds, and if there is no evidence of breathing, that's considered sufficient for the declaration of brain death.
Oh.
The things have evolved to what's known as DCD, donation by cardiac death. What happens in those patients is they are not brain dead at all by anybody's criteria. But what they do is go to the relatives to get a do not resuscitate order, a DNR. Then they take them off the ventilator and they wait till they're without a pulse. Not until the heart stops. Not until the heart stops. The heart's still beating. They wait until there's not a pulse, that they don't record a pulse. How long do they wait? They have shortened that time down to as short as 75 seconds, 1.25 minutes in 2 babies in Colorado, where they took them off the ventilator and then after 75 seconds proceeded to cut out the heart and transplant it to someone else. And then there is this thing called the apnea test. The apnea test is is not a test for sleep apnea. That's the first thing. Strike that out. A lot of people have tests for sleep apnea, and you have friends or maybe even yourself that has sleep apnea. So it's not a test for sleep apnea, but what's the apnea test? It's part of every declaration of brain death. You cannot declare brain death unless they do the apnea test. Well, what's the apnea test? Well, the patient with the head injury that's on the ventilator is pushing the air in 15 times a minute. So every 3 to 5 seconds it pushes the air in. So the apnea test is they take away that support of the vital activity of breathing. They take it away. And remember, the person is getting it every 3 to 5 seconds. And so they take it away, not for 10 seconds, not for 30 seconds, not for 1 minute, not for 2 minutes, not for 5 minutes, but for 10 minutes. They suffocate the patient. And they suffocate the patient, and when they do that, the carbon dioxide goes up. And when the carbon dioxide goes up, we know that makes the brain swell and makes them worse. And they do this every time they declare somebody brain dead. And you need to know for yourself and your relatives, no apnea test. No one should ever get an apnea test. It's a test that's not done for the good and the health of the patient. It's done to declare them brain dead so they can get their organs.
Unreal.
Yeah. It's incredibly
Unreal.
shocking. Incredibly shocking.
This kind of information never comes out, and when it does, it's on obscure websites like you have, or on blog posts that nobody really normally will get into.
That's it.
But the desire that I guess the public or some section of the public has to get people to consent to that, like it's a great thing to do. Well, maybe it is a great thing to do, but they have no idea what the procedure is for it.
No, this is it. And we are, as human beings, we're vulnerable because we only know the information that we're exposed to.
As you said, that is diabolical.
It is diabolical. So we've got some examples here. This is a great website. This is organfacts.net. I highly recommend this site. Lots and lots of good information here. This is a young woman, Karina Melchior. She suffered severe injuries after crashing her car in Denmark. Doctors said that she was virtually brain dead. Today, she's now making a full recovery and is able to walk and talk. Karina was admitted to hospital with severe injuries and slipped into a coma. Doctors advised her parents that there was little chance for her survival and that brain death would probably occur within days, and suggested withdrawing life support and making preparations for organ donation. And her parents, of course, agreed, because so many people think this is a great thing to do because they don't know what it means. They simply cannot give informed consent because they're not informed, full stop. So the parents agreed, and Karina was taken off her respirator but continued to breathe on her own. Doctors were actually gathered around Karina's bedside discussing her supposed brain death and the possibility of organ donation when she suddenly opened her eyes and began moving her legs. Karina's father told the Danish newspaper Ekstra Bladet, those bandits in white coats gave up too quickly because they wanted an organ donor. Right there.
Yeah.
This is just horrifying. And there are just, there we go, just case after case after case, and they're just the ones that are on this website. We have another lady here who, she was 57. She suffered a sudden heart attack. She stopped breathing. And it was 15 minutes before paramedics could arrive at her home and resuscitate her. And doctors believe that brain death, the brain starts to die after only 6 minutes without breathing. So there seemed to be little hope of recovery. When she was taken to hospital, doctors decided that she'd suffered irreversible brain damage and was probably brain dead. Her husband was informed of all this and decided to phone their children to come to the hospital for what might be their final goodbyes. NBC reports that their daughter said, when my father called me after she was rushed into the hospital, he felt that she was dead. Michelle's condition that the family waited for a few days to see if there's any improvement in Michelle's condition, but nothing changed. The doctors also felt that there was no hope of recovery. After 3 weeks, the doctors told Carl, the woman that you know as your wife is not there anymore, so he decided to unplug the ventilator. And minutes later, she showed signs of recovery and started breathing on her own. So this was considered impossible by the doctors. They still thought that she would die, but she was moved into a hospice to live out her final hours or days, but she kept improving. Within a week, she was sitting up, talking, and feeding herself. She underwent heart surgery and weeks of speech therapy and physiotherapy. After 4 months, she was back at home with her family and had nearly fully recovered. So these examples of people who've been, declared brain dead, or they're going to be brain dead any day now, and you should let us take their organs. Absolutely appalling. And the advice here: never abandon your loved one to the so-called doctors.
I'm sorry, you showed us a listing there of looked like dozens of different people that have stories about this.
Yeah, here we go. This is the was not dead tab. And there's just so many of them there, just case after case after case. And it just shows, this is a site that, like LifeSite News, they are very much, sharing the information up to date. Their homepage has up-to-date news on it. So, it's a useful site. There's some good information there as well. This is this gentleman pictured here was Dr. David W. Evans, and he was a retired consultant in cardiology from Papworth and Addenbrooke's hospitals. Now, in the United Kingdom, Papworth Hospital is an amazing medical centre. Papworth and Addenbrooke's, that is, it's an absolute centre for particularly heart and lung things. And I'm just going to quote his comment if I can find it in here, having just scrolled the page. Yep, here we go. So talking about as Dr. Byrne was talking about 30 different sets of criteria in a short space of time. Let's just keep moving the goalpost so we can get more organs is basically what that means. Let's just keep on changing the criteria so that we can declare people dead and then we can take their organs. Because in the United States, the value of those organs in a private medical system, it's millions of pounds, millions of dollars, I should say.
But they find people dead in city parks and so forth, and there's no obvious cause until they look the body over and they see that person's had a kidney removed, yet they're still in their regular street clothes, but the body is dumped there after such a surgery as that. And very crude, very rough, but they're found. I know that there have been a number of television specials about this kind of procedure, but if there's money in it, somebody will find a way to do it.
Yeah, I'm afraid this is very true. My personal view is that it should be banned. It should be made illegal worldwide like that. It is absolutely, there is nothing. I mean, let me just quote Deuteronomy here. Deuteronomy 32:39. Now see that I, even I, am he, and there is no God besides me. And I kill, he says, I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. Nor is there any who can deliver from my hand. The doctor isn't going to deliver you from God's hand. Someone else's organ isn't going to deliver you from God's hand. This is something that we have to believe in. We say, yes, he does this because he's God. And we place our faith in him.
Amen.
So here is Dr. Evans talking about these changes in criteria and so on. He says, none of these things is relevant to my present and almost certainly final position, which, as you know from your reading of what I have managed to get published, is based on true science and my understanding of a doctor's duty toward his patient. The fundamental problem is that one cannot get transplantable organs expected to function in the body of another for 10 years from the truly dead. Hence, the attempts to redefine death in an anticipatory sense for that purpose. All of them, the neurological and recent faux circulatory redefinitions are, as Shah et al. Pointed out in the Journal of Medical Ethics last year, no more than legal fictions, inventions for the purpose. Added to that are the terrible things certain members of our profession seem willing to do to their patients before they are in any sense dead, when the condition of the wanted organs becomes the paramount consideration. And it's very, very much a case of, if someone decides that you're going to be an organ donor, you are treated completely differently than if you were going to survive. So the conditions that your body needs are not the conditions of an organ donor, where they want, literally everything to do with everything from body temperature and so on is different if you are going to be an organ donor than if you're going to be a patient who survives.
Oh, I see. So we're using a different ethic depending on that choice or not. And
spot on. Yeah.
So if you are going to be an organ donor, they're going to treat you in a manner that preserves the organ rather than preserves you.
Yeah.
As a person. Okay.
Yeah. And so we get onto some of the interesting things that have been happening. The press is always very willing to put out articles about organ donation. They don't really seem to care that they're lying constantly to the public. We have the case here. This is one of my posts. This innocent-looking woman, if you passed her in the street, you certainly wouldn't think that she was up to no good. She seems, looks perfectly normal, doesn't she? But this is an ethicist.
Yeah.
She's an ethicist. Now, I can't imagine what the need is for medical ethics. You just, there's right and there's wrong, but it's actually talking about kind of managing all the gray areas, isn't it? It's about how far can we push this? How can we, and literally, how can we get more organs? Well, we just make it an opt-out system instead of an opt-in system, because most people just simply won't bother to opt out. And that's what they're hoping for.
How could they possibly get away with that, except if they keep everybody ignorant of what's happening here?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I have spent my time on websites like the Daily Mail putting in comments about, organs come from living people, not dead bodies. I mean, people really don't know this. That is the fundamental fact. Organs come from living people, not dead bodies. This ethicist wanted to, I'm actually going to quote from the article again, which is linked there, and you can find all this through if you just click on the tab in my blog, you can find all of these articles. She was talking about hospital patients who were in a permanent coma could be, now this is where it gets comical. It's ridiculous. This statement from the press. She wants these coma patients, they should be given drugs to hasten their death so doctors can harvest their organs for transplants. So we're talking about people who are in a coma. Obviously, they most certainly won't be dead when their organs are removed, if this is what they're going to do. But the press is willing to put out the notion that they're going to be given drugs to hasten their death so that their organs can be taken after they've died. Not true. It's just quite simply fundamentally inaccurate. And she's talking here about, new laws should sweep aside the legal ban on euthanasia and allow the organs of those, and the language here, the organs of those killed to be removed for transplant, Dr. Zoe Fritz argued. Now, euthanasia is meant to be a voluntary thing. And of course, it is absolutely wrong. It's quite fundamentally wrong. Thou shalt not kill. This is not our role to go around. We don't have dominion over other human beings. We have dominion over nature. We don't have dominion over human beings. That's, thou shalt not kill. It's pretty simple. But the idea here is that they're going to kill people through euthanasia. It's a bit of a different definition of euthanasia, in my understanding. Yeah,
she must
absolutely
be a sociopath.
She's a consultant physician at Cambridge University Hospitals and a medical ethics academic at Warwick and Cambridge universities. And she said that where a patient is going to die, it could be in a patient's best interest to actively end their life with a drug that would stop the heart, both to minimize potential suffering and in order to be able to have vital organs donated. Now, we've already heard from Dr. Byrne that the heart is not going to be stopped, because once that happens, the blood stops pumping and, you can't take organs from a dead body. Quite simply, You can't take organs from a dead body. Now, I wrote to Dr. Fritz. I actually, I went on the internet and I searched for her, and I thought someone's going to have an email address for her somewhere. So I wrote to her, and I'm just going to, if I can just actually, how do I do this? In theory, I can make this bigger. There we go. All right, so I wrote to her and said, "Dear Dr. Fritz, I wanted to contact you with regards to your recent comments on euthanasia for coma patients in order to preserve their organs for donation. I wanted to get your comments on how you might first of all create an environment where patients were actually giving informed consent to be organ donors in the first place. Currently, registered donors believe that they will be dead when their organs are harvested. I asked a dear friend of mine a simple question. Would you like a general anesthetic when your organs are removed? She looked bewildered and asked me why she'd need one. She'd be dead, she said. Thankfully, she isn't a registered donor. Of course, this just shows the level of ignorance the public are in regarding organ donation. If in fact anesthetic wasn't even used, as I understand it, until recently, when anesthetists present during organ harvesting noted that donors' vital signs were very similar to those of living patients who had later reported unsuccessful anesthesia and claimed to have felt everything. That is a chilling fact and precipitated the reluctant use of anesthetics during organ harvesting procedures. So what might you be able to do, Dr. Fritz, to design a campaign to ensure that all current organ donors are fully aware of the facts about organ donation and have indeed given informed consent to be donors? After that, you might consider spreading this into euthanasia, but in my view, unless or until the medical profession start telling the truth on organ donation, it's in no position to lead on ethics. As a layperson, I'd appreciate your comments.
Excellent.
Funnily enough, I never got a response.
I didn't think you would.
No surprise there. Yeah, very much. That is that's the kind of thing that you expect. I have been in contact with a member of the House of Lords who was very shocked at the information. I've been in touch with, I think, I've forgotten his name now, one of our bishops, I think, in the UK, who was very pro organ donation and really felt that this was something that all Christians should do. We should absolutely all be organ donors. And I tried to educate him on that by providing all the various information, but he was not at all keen to change his viewpoint. He really felt that
did he know these things?
He wrote back to me and he said that that he and his, and I think he was referring to friends in the medical profession, were satisfied with the definition of brain death. So he was satisfied that people are dead when they're declared brain dead, which of course is not biblical.
Well, why in the world would anybody in the Christian church want to keep anything in the Torah these days? Let's just toss out the whole thing.
This is the Church of England. The Church of England, who recently, this is Ely Cathedral, one of the most famous cathedrals in England, just up the road from me. They flew the pride flag from the church. So it just tells you that Church of England, not a biblical organization any longer.
No.
Sad to say. So what questions arise for you, Jackson, from the information that I've given so far?
Well, one that comes right away, and you've already discussed it a little bit, is why don't well, it's obvious here that the benefactors of this kind of donation don't want to keep the information about how this is done in the public.
Yeah.
It would be something, it seems like they'd want to hide. Is anybody that you know of actually giving out the information here from that set of people?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of anybody actually thinking about it in the UK who's talking about this. The information is out there. Most of the people who are putting it out are, I guess, people like me who found out, or their family members of donors who found out, and have shared that information. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could have a class action lawsuit?
Well, I was thinking too, if we could get a listing of the people who are to be organ donors, if that could be made public, we could notify these people of what is actually going on here, but I don't suppose there'd be any way to get that out of the state.
No, and I mean in the US, each different state I think has different rules. An awful lot of people are just put down as organ donor on their driving license. So that's something that you need to opt out of. You actually need to make the effort to do that. In the UK, it started off with Wales. That's actually where I began with. That's why I put this article out to begin with, because in 2015, Wales, which is part of the United Kingdom, they decided that they were going to start an opt-out system. And that's what prompted me to write that first blog post, because I was so... What is very interesting, Jackson, is that this has not resulted in an increase in available organs, which is very interesting. There aren't more transplants happening in Wales than there were, it would seem. And what is very interesting is, if I just click through to a recent article, of course, the Daily Mail, again, just spouting absolute lies. The headline of the piece: "Our new organ donor law is so essential." This woman argues it's absolutely essential that we should have an opt-out system. And please forgive me for the horrible adverts on here that I can't get rid of. If you look at the comments, and these comments have been moderated in advance, so these have already been through the censor, right? These are the only kind of comments that they got. And the top 10 is very interesting. The number of people who, again, they don't know the truth about organ donation. They don't actually know that they will be alive when their organs are removed. But the fact that the government has overstepped the mark here and said, your body belongs to us.
Absolutely. Well, this one fellow here says that the one thing that does belong to me is my body that the government doesn't have. And what he's actually doing is giving it back. Yeah.
He's saying, no, I'm not going to let you do that. The state does not own my body. I do. Yep, absolutely.
So he's deceived to think that he is making an autonomous decision here, because what he's actually doing is he's giving himself back to be slaughtered when the time comes.
What he's saying here is that if he opts out, then at least he can't be an organ donor, whereas most people... So what's really noticeable in these comments, there's one guy here, or one person here, I should say, saying, I have carried an organ donor card, a donor card for many years, happy to give my organs to someone who needed them after I die, which of course is an error, it's a lie. But he says, but I've now opted out. My body is one of the few things the government had no control over, and there is a vast difference between voluntarily donating organs and the government having the right to take them. Right? The oft quoted mantra that you don't need them after you're gone is irrelevant. It is the principle of no longer owning your body. Absolutely right. So a lot of people who are still in the dark, don't know this information, don't know that organ donors are living people, not dead bodies, are now opting out because the government has crossed this line. And I think that is very interesting. In the first comment here, top comment of the whole article, saying, I've now withdrawn consent. You know, it's like saying my organs are mine to give out of kindness, not for the state to determine taking by default. Yeah, very, very bad law. And I'm going to close that because those adverts...
It's unbelievable. I mean, I guess in these days, yes, I suppose it's believable. Everything that we wouldn't have imagined a few years ago is crawling out of the pit now. And
And it's actually, I've got to the stage, Jackson, where if I see something promoted, I know it must be wrong. It's quite simple. You see something promoted in the press, it's got to be wrong.
It's got to be wrong.
Unfortunately, because we're now in that time where that's where we are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about blood, because one of the things that's very important to understand is that organs have to come from living people because they have to be perfused with living blood. Okay, when a person dies, their blood in fact becomes toxic. If you took the blood of a dead person and injected it in a living person, it would kill them.
Are you going to use the screen share now?
I am. Yep. Okay, I'm just going to put another one up. So that's why I didn't change it.
All right.
Here we go. Somewhere here. Here we go. So we think about blood, we think about blood donation. We think about, again, now that's completely, you want to donate your blood, that's entirely up to you, because you are a living donor of a living substance. But this is, nevertheless, it's your lifeblood that you're donating. Now, the human body has two types of blood in it. All animals, our food animals, the same thing. There's myoglobin and there's hemoglobin. So the myoglobin is in the muscles of the body, and the hemoglobin is in your veins, arteries, and capillaries. And it is the lifeblood. God says that the life of the animal is in the blood. So another terrible thing about these organs is that this is someone else's blood as well. This is someone else's lifeblood. This is, I'm sure you've read those stories of people who are who've received an organ and they've had changes in personality,
Yes,
changes
of
in their
course.
tastes. Or they're
Change
fascinating
of their
stories.
accents.
Yes.
Change of their languages.
Yeah.
It's incredible, really.
Absolutely incredible. But when we think about blood, obviously, as I say, organs have to contain, when I say perfused, I mean literally the person has to be alive for that blood to not kill the recipient of that organ. So when a person donates blood, that blood is living blood from a living person, and it can be stored very carefully for a period of time and still be safe to use. But blood from a dead person is not okay. And I'm just going to read from Leviticus here.
17?
This is Leviticus, sorry?
17?
Yes, 17, 10 to 12. And whatever man of the house of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you who eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Therefore I said to the children of Israel, no one among you shall eat blood, nor shall any stranger who dwells among you eat blood. Now, the blood that we donate comes from our venous system, veins, arteries, capillaries. It's the same blood that when you slaughter an animal, that's the blood that God says you're not to eat it, and you're actually to pour it on the ground. You're to cover it with dust, aren't you? Yes. That's the very same blood. That's the same blood system that women menstruate from. That's the same type of blood. And when a woman menstruates, she's unclean. And I've always thought this is very interesting. I think that women are unclean when we menstruate because our life is coming out of us. And we might want to think about whether we want someone else's life in our body. This is another aspect of it that we don't think about.
That certainly makes sense.
Yeah. Now we've got a chart here. This is from the FDA. And this is a chart showing the blood transfusion associated fatalities. Now it doesn't, and I'm not trying to sort of make this into too much of a thing, but people do need to realize that blood transfusions are not without their risks. They do have risks associated with them, and people do die from blood transfusions. Far fewer people die from blood transfusions these days than used to. Anaphylaxis, which is where you have an allergic reaction to someone else's blood, used to be a major thing, but doctors have got very, very good at spotting that and dealing with it using medication now. But there's a couple of things down here. There is something called, now, what did I do with that note? I had something written down about this. Hold on, let me just find it. It's on here. There are two types of problems that can occur with having a blood transfusion. There is this one, which is, let me see if I can find the definition here. Let me see. I had this written down this morning. Ah, there it is. So many notes. I haven't got them all in the right place. So TRALI, this is transfusion-related acute lung injury. And this happens, I don't think they even know why it happens. Some people just have this reaction and it kills them. And then there's something called TACO, T-A-C-O. This is transfusion-associated circulatory overload. And again, it's a very serious thing that can kill people. So we've got some statistics down here. TRALI occurred in 1.4% of surgical patients. That's not an insignificant risk factor.
No,
Something just to be
not.
aware of. It's absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
TACO occurred in 4.3% of surgical patients, with higher rates associated with increased volume of blood transfused, advanced age, and total interoperative, can't even say that, fluid balance. So these are not, they're not something to be ignored when it comes to blood. I mean, I think in an emergency situation, most people would take blood. I know Jehovah's Witnesses say that they don't. I have a lot of respect for that position. I'm not here to tell anyone what they should do. You do what you feel the Lord is leading you to do. But it is interesting that we, again, are told that this is completely benign, totally safe. Everyone should give blood. It's perfectly okay to receive it. But that is someone else's life going into your body. And I don't know what the effect of that is. I would say that I think perhaps you'd want to do everything you could to avoid it, rather than just think that this is a benign thing. Mm-hmm. I think that obviously, as I say, when people donate blood, it's not, no one's being hurt by that. It's not, the chance of you being harmed by donating blood is infinitesimally small in comparison to organ donation, which is a completely different thing. But it is very interesting that more and more research is being done, and we've got one here. This is from the University of Edinburgh, showing that lower levels of blood transfusions actually result in better outcomes for patients. The more liberal the use of blood transfusion for patients, actually the higher the death rates. And so managing that is obviously a very difficult thing.
I imagine. There's so many different factors there to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing you should always bear in mind is that if you need elective surgery, for instance, if you needed, I don't know, a hip replacement or something like that, you can actually donate your own blood in advance. People need to sort of be aware that that is a possibility too. You don't actually have to put yourself in that position. And again, this is, I'm making this connection. It's up to each of you listening to, to pray about that. It's, while I would not take an organ, I'm not saying I would necessarily not have a blood transfusion if I was in an emergency situation. I probably wouldn't have much say in the matter. I'm in Britain, we have the NHS. Don't think I'd be asked. But it's just something to be aware of, that the blood that we menstruate as women is the same blood that we pour on the ground if an animal is being slaughtered. And this is the same blood that's being donated. And we might want to just think that having someone else's life in our body could have an effect on us, and we don't know.
No, there's also the risk of it being tainted, and that's not a low percentage of blood these days, or hemoglobin. From what last time I checked into this, it's been 15 years ago, but
so between 2014 and 2018, 14% of the fatalities were from blood contamination. So it just shows you that, absolutely, that's a problem. The circulatory overload and the lung problems are actually accounting for far more of the deaths. It's, we're talking about like over half of the deaths. So it's a very, it's just something to be aware of, that this is not a completely benign thing. Again, this information just isn't put out. People don't talk about it. Let me stop the share there. Okay, fantastic. So yes, just very, very vital thing for people to be aware of, specifically about organ donation, but also just bearing in mind that again, those organs are taken from living patients because they have to have living blood in them. And that in itself, there's the whole thing it's grim, isn't it, Jackson? It's a horrible
Grim
subject.
is a very good word for it. Yes, it is
Yeah.
grim.
Yeah.
Well, so we need to make people aware the best we can.
Mm,
I wish I had a more bully pulpit to do so, but I'm working on that. This should be a major concern about for people who are believers and who are um, active in
mm,
promoting their faith, because as you read from Leviticus 17, this is a grave sin.
yeah.
And we
Yeah.
need to talk more about it. And the very fact that not just the giving and use of blood, but
Mm,
that the every organ is gorged
mm,
and gorged with blood
yeah.
that's being taken and given to other people. And we've already seen with, for instance, the HIV epidemic,
Yes.
which started out really with tainted blood and went from there, that there are going to be repercussions here that go far off into the future
Mm,
that you just can't even imagine would be the case at the time.
yeah.
So, more research is needed on our part. We can't remain ignorant on this and a number of other subjects. We need
Mm,
to be active in letting other people know.
mm,
And the what we have today is a world that is more open than any other time because we have social media and instantaneous communication, even instantaneous telephone. We can call anybody in the world, talk to anyone in the world. We can
mm,
have meetings with people all over the world. And at the same time, while this is a breakthrough, we also have what I would consider the the cancer of evil coming out of the ground, exposing itself right
yeah.
now
Yeah.
and recruiting for itself. And like you said before, this is a real strong sign of what at least Christians have called the end times.
Mm,
There are just so many signs right now to this. And that's one of the things that I really like to get out, some of these signs, but this is one that's just entirely overlooked.
yeah. Yeah. This is one subject, and I think it's people don't want to think about it.
No.
They just don't want to think about it. It's like, well, they just assume that the person will be dead when their organs are taken, and therefore, they just don't want to think about it. So I think that, I mean, just judging by, the number of comments that you get on an article,
Hmm.
for instance, in the Daily Mail on this subject in comparison to other articles, it doesn't get the traffic. People don't want to comment on it. People don't want to read it. They don't want to know about it. And so actually, in a way, this has allowed a system to function, um, which is evil. It's pure evil.
Yes.
I don't see how anybody could be involved in this and think it's okay.
But it's cloaked in
Yes.
what people think, well, I should be doing this because this is such a good thing.
Mm, yeah.
It's
And if
cloaked
you
in it.
only read the press, you would never know that this
Hmm.
is actually, it's pure evil. This is something that we absolutely need to talk about and need to share. And I hope that those who listen to this broadcast will share this information, share the links, and really, really help to get this information out there.
I want to thank you for bringing it to our attention. This is, again, like I said, it's cloaked in good deeds and what is good, and people see it that way, I'm sure. And a lot of
Mm,
people make up their mind without really knowing
yeah.
what's going on here, even to the point of, in the end, giving their lives for naught.
Yes. Yes, and that brings me back again, and I'm just going to, because I put this at the end of my notes as well to read again. This is Deuteronomy 32:39. Now see that I, even I, am he, and there is no God besides me. I kill and I make alive, I wound and I heal, nor is there any who can deliver from my hand. We need to be humble before our God. The doctor is not the answer to every problem. A pill is not the solution to every ill. We must rely on God and we must trust in him, not necessarily to do nothing, but to guide us as to what we should do, because very often there are other better solutions, and no one's going to deliver you out of his hand. No doctor's going to deliver you out of his hand. We need to face sin and deal with that.
Well, let's start by facing it in prayer. What do you say? Heavenly Father, we praise you and thank you for your Torah, for the stepping stones by which we might live a righteous life. And we are appalled at the overlooking of some of these stepping stones that you have given us, and especially this commandment about blood and the mutilation that comes from the giving of organs. Help us to be heralds of the bad news so that those of us who believe might be able to walk in paths of righteousness and be able to articulate to others the very danger of this practice, how it is disguised, and how to take the disguise away and reveal it. I thank you for Lis and her voice and her vision, and for this opportunity to come together and sound the alarm. Yes, we thank you. And what we do in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you,
sis.
so much.
Thank you.